The story began with the protagonist holding his hand and breathing heavily. He stood with his team in front of the Demon Lord. He thought that this was the last time. They finally cornered the Demon Lord. The weakest class, the Black Mage, Kai put his injured hand to his chest. He thought Colette, the girl in his memories, was holding a beautiful bouquet in her hands. Beads of sweat were running down his face. After that, he finally. The strongest class, the warrior Ares, jerked his leg away from the magic projectile that flew towards it. He shouted, Kai. He must stop the Demon Lord. Kai shouted, blood blindness. A magic seal appeared under him, from which many hands appeared. He put his hand forward and shouted, blind the Demon Lord. The hands moved forward and grabbed the Demon Lord. Kai shouted, now, Ares. He must finish him off. A sinister smile appeared on the warrior's face. He took the sword in both hands, ran forward and said that they will see each other, brother. After that, he pierced Kai's chest along with the Demon Lord. The protagonist said in confusion, what? He thought that he injured him along with the Demon Lord. They fell to the floor. Ares spread his arms out to the sides and said smugly, he crushed the Demon Lord. Now he is a real hero. Kai turned around and desperately asked why. Ares asked, and he asks why? He smiled madly again and covered his face with his hand and said, a damn Black Mage is an older brother, he should not be so arrogant and try to taste glory, bastard. Kai shouted, what is he talking about? The highest class, the righteous Ionara, spread his arms out to the sides and said, as he said. He adjusted his glasses and said with a smirk, something so evil as a black magician as a partner for the upper class, even if it was a hard test sent to him by God, it was too reckless. Kai shouted, what is he talking about? He uses black magic. And he always helped them, guys. The ultra-rare class magic swordswoman, Urza, laughed and pointed her finger at him and said, help them? He really is too cocky. He is the weakest class, idiot. He worked hard for the past 5 years, there was only one step left. When they turned 15, everyone was given a special role by God called a class. On that day, he became a black magician. A dark magic class that is hated because its members are closer to a demon than a human. Because of this, Kai suffered humiliation. It is the weakest class among other evil forces. As people say, a class of losers. Urza put her foot on his head and said smiling, to think that they would treat a member of the weakest class as a human. Her share would be reduced if he lived, so he should already be dead. Ares grabbed the sword that was in Kai and the Demon Lord's chest and said then, now him. He started to take out the sword, and the Black Mage screamed in pain. He thought, Colette? A while ago, Colette's father said the Black Mage and righteous classes are not suitable for each other. The engagement will be broken. She screamed, no. Father, this is too much. She wants to marry Kai. He looked at her and said that at least he allows her to say goodbye to him. Kai looked at him and said desperately, it can't be. Colette stretched out her hands to him, but her hand was grabbed by the guards. She closed her eyes, and then took off the bracelet from her hand and put it in Kai's hands, asking her to take it. Tears gathered in her eyes. He looked at the bracelet in his hands in shock. She said, this bracelet, he must take good care of it, goodbye. A tear rolled down her face and she said that they would definitely see each other again. In the present, Ares continued to laugh. He walked up to Kai and whispered in his ear that she told him to kill him. And his father said so too. His father was the strongest knight in the Holy Kingdom. Many brave warriors came out from under his hand. The head of the respected Austin family. In the past, Austin said that he would not tolerate a vile black mage in his house. But if he took part in the enslavement of the Demon Lord, he could return to the Austin family. Kai knelt down in front of him and asked in confusion, enslavement of demon lords? His father said that he would take care of the engagement with his childhood friend Colette. Soon after, Colette was imprisoned in a room in the royal palace, and used to create a great wall to protect the holy city. If he defeated the Demon Lord, Colette would be released. They would get married and live happily together. He made a damn effort to regain his father's trust and bring Colette back. And he finally succeeded. He thought that his class level had reached a strength stat of 999. But still. In the present, Ares smiled maliciously and said in Kai's ear, it's a shame, brother. Then he spread his arms out to the sides and laughed loudly and said, because of the invincible younger brother, the elder brother was killed by the Demon Lord. Tears were streaming down Kai's face. In the end, his father and Ares were just using him. He said, damn. Ares, holding the sword in his hands, told him to stop annoying them, useless black mage. He shouldn't worry, He's taking good care of Colette, so he should be dead already. If Kai knew it would be like this, he would have just taken Colette with him, and they would have run away together. He wouldn't care about other people or common sense. He would just enjoy their happiness. In that case, the bracelet Colette gave him shattered, and her words echoed in his head, Kai. Please! He shouldn't die in her arms. He thought, Colette's voice? He felt sorry. He wanted to see Colette one last time. After a while, birds were sitting on the window of the room Kai was lying in. Colette said, Kai, how long is he going to sleep? The protagonist opened one eye and sighed, and then he suddenly raised his torso and asked in surprise, Huh? He breathed heavily, his face covered in sweat. He looked at the girl and asked in surprise, Colette? He thought that she was imprisoned in the castle. Why was she here? She ran up to him and asked what happened. He was sweating all over. He put his hand on his chest and asked, Huh? He thought he had no wounds. Then he shouted in confusion, What the hell? Colette smiled, holding a towel in her hands and said, Good morning, Kai. Then she was looking for something in her bag. Kai looked at her and thought, something was wrong. Colette should be in her 20s now. However, she looks so young. She covered her mouth with her hand in embarrassment and asked, Come on, Kai, he still hasn't woken up? It's such a beautiful day. Is he okay? The black mage laughed and apologized to her, saying that she was right, he probably hasn't fully woken up yet. He said the last word with worry, as he noticed his reflection in the mirror. He thought in surprise that he also looked young. Colette said embarrassedly, Kai. He should finally wake up. Then she smiled and spread her arms out to the sides. She said that today is the class determination ceremony. She is so looking forward to it. Beads of sweat were running down the black mage's face. He asked in confusion, Determination ceremony? The determination ceremony is today? Then he grabbed her by the shoulders and asked excitedly, What year is it? She looked at him in surprise. He asked, He is not a black mage yet? She asked in confusion, Huh? He thought, Is this all a dream? Then Colette pushed him away and, embarrassedly covering her mouth with her hand, said that he is too close. He said, No, I'm sorry. The black mage thought, this feeling, no, this is not a dream. Could he have traveled to the past? Then he looked at his hand in surprise. He thought, there is a mark on his hand? Why? Colette looked at his hand and cried out in surprise, Is this a class crest? Why does his class already have a determination? Kai gritted his teeth and thought, this can't be. If he really went to the past, his crest wouldn't be there yet either. He already had a crest before the selection ceremony? Class? Why? Open status. A board appeared in front of him, saying his class was Black Mage, level 999, no skills. No difference from before he died. And this? He noticed the last line, which said his status was blocked, entering for the second time. His mouth dropped open in surprise and asked, for the second time? He thought that inexplicable things happened one after another, but some things were obvious. Right now, he was in the past. Was this some kind of magic? No, this was beyond any existing magical powers. No one here could do such a thing, not even the Demon Lord. He remembered hearing Colette's voice before he passed out. She pulled him out of his thoughts by shouting, Kai! Kai! He has to listen to her. She took his hand and asked, Is everything okay? And this coat of arms? A bracelet fell to the floor. She looked at it and said that she thought she had lost this bracelet, but it was here. Then she picked it up. Memories flashed through Kai's mind. He got up from the bed and took his hand and thought, I see. The bracelet. This is Colette, her power as a righteous one. Then he laughed loudly and said, Yes. It was her. He hugged her tightly and said that if they knew how it all happened that time, they could change the future. She confusedly told him to wait. Kai is a black mage. The protagonist thought, Colette's imprisonment in the future, and him, Ares killed. He would change it. He said that he wouldn't let her. He wouldn't let her get away again. Colette sighed embarrassedly, and then said, What is he saying? He let go of Colette and stood in front of her, laughed embarrassedly and said, I'm sorry, he was just sudden. She embarrassedly looked away and said, Well, it's not that she didn't like it, but it was so sudden, he surprised her. She is his fiancée, so even if he wants such things. He asked, Huh? Yes. She looked down and said, It's nothing. Kai scratched his head and said, An engagement, when his father finds out that he is a black mage. Some people say that they are closer to demons. Therefore, an engagement. Colette interrupted him and said, Kai. Does he know? She thinks there is no big difference between black mages and other classes. After all, he is a he. Kai looked at her with confusion and thought that Colette is still Colette. Hasn't changed at all. She didn't change her mind when she found out he was a black mage. Even though everyone hated him, she always extended her hand to him. He doesn't believe in people, but with Colette, it's different. As expected, Colette and him? Kai then said, Colette, she shouldn't be surprised by what he's about to say. She asked in surprise, what happened? He took his hand and said that he came back from the future 5 years ago. The future him? No, the him in front of her now is a black mage with level 999. She covered her mouth with her hand and asked in surprise, Huh? Huh? From the future? Level 999? He said that he would prove it to her. After that, he closed his eyes and energy began to concentrate from his outstretched finger. After that, he said, Rise from the ground, archdemon. After that, a demon appeared with a roar. Colette screamed in fear, No way. A demon? Kai held his hand aside and controlled the magic seal. He confirmed her words and said that he summoned it from hell. Black magicians of level 999 can make contracts with high-level demons like an archdemon. He thought that the fact that since this contact was made for the first time, it was still in effect proved that he can use all his knowledge of black magic without problems. And most importantly, he proved that the first time was real. He looked at Colette and thought that they wanted to see each other in real life. He and Colette turned a dream into reality. In that case, he needed to hurry. No, he just didn't have time. Because today is the class selection ceremony. The demon lord will be born today. Kai held his hand outstretched in front of the huge demon. Colette fell to the floor in fear. The archdemon said, Lord Kai, please, he must give him his orders. Colette asked fearfully, Kai? He stood in front of the demon, and then turned around and scratched his head and apologized for scaring her, but he thinks it is obvious now that he is a level 999 black mage. She smiled and confirmed his words. She did not doubt his words at first. He would never lie to her, right? He said embarrassedly, Colette. She stood up and took his hands and said that this is incredible. She heard that even 10 holy knights cannot defeat the archdemon. Kai said that black magicians are not able to master other skills, but they can use all types of magic. They can also use a lot of powerful spells. She said it was cool. He said she was talking cool, Colette now. He closed his eyes and told her to listen to him carefully. She looked at him seriously and he said that today she would get the righteous class, and Ares would get the warrior class. She asked in surprise, Ares? Another warrior was born in the Austin family. Kai shouted that this was bad. If Ares became a warrior. At that time, Ares looked into the room and asked, Did he call him? Brother. Kai looked in his direction and said his name. Colette said in fear, Oh, Ares. What happened? He walked into the room and said, Oh, and what about the archdemon? He's not here anymore? The archdemon? What is he talking about? Okay, never mind. They were talking about him, weren't they? The warrior candidate is talking about the others behind their backs. Colette shouted that he wasn't talking about him behind their backs. Ares put his hand on the hilt of his sword and said, Colette. He came closer to her and said in her ear, Instead of this guy, why shouldn't she be with him? Kai pushed his younger brother away from Colette and told him to go away. He told him to go, right now. Ares started to take out his sword and asked, What if he says that he doesn't want to? Kai covered Colette with his hand and silently looked at her brother. She asked in confusion, Kai? There was a magic seal on the floor near the black magician's leg. The warrior said that his hands were shaking. What a weakling! Kai said, Ares, that's enough. The brothers clenched their teeth in anger, looking at each other. They were interrupted by a man who entered the room and asked for forgiveness. He said, So he was here, Lord Ares. The Duke was calling him. The warrior put his sword in its sheath and turned around and said that he was coming. Kai looked at Colette and asked if they would go too. She said yes. After that, they left the room and stood opposite each other. Ares looked at them irritably. After some time, they were walking down the street. Kai looked at Colette and said that he felt some nostalgia from the city and the people around him. She looked at him smiling and said yes, he hasn't been here for a long time. Someone shouted, Master Kai. The black mage asked confusedly, Master Kai? Right, that's still the case. The man held a clay pot in his hands and said, Master Kai. Thank you for getting rid of those bastards back then. Kai thought, after all, no one knows that he is a black mage. Colette said smiling, Kai, He sees that everyone is happy to see him. That's because he has always worked hard. After some time, he suggested that Colette continue their conversation. She agreed with him, and he said that a little later Ares would receive the warrior class at a ceremony. But then he would make a big mistake. Because of Ares, the demon lord Griselda will be born. And in just 3 days, the Holy Kingdom will perish. She said in fear that. He looked at the residents and said that in fact, the area will remain, but some people will be killed. In order to protect the rest of the holy city, the Great Barrier will be erected. To maintain it, she will be imprisoned in the royal palace. Moreover, he will receive the class of Black Mage and will be expelled from the Austin family. They will separate them. She shouted excitedly, "What did he say? She doesn't want this. She always wants to be with him." He widened his eyes in surprise and then put his arm around her shoulders and asked, "Okay, then will she go with him?" He proposed to stay together. She blushed in embarrassment and said, "Kai, is this he is proposing to her?" Then she suddenly leaned down to hug him and said that she was so happy. She proposed to always be together. In his first life, he was stupid. If only he had done that from the beginning. He hugged Colette tightly and thanked her. It would have been better if he hugged Colette like that much earlier. After a while, he took the reins of the horse Colette was riding and said that she should hide in Lakis village for a while. That way, she would escape the disasters that the war would bring. She would reach the village in about 3 days. Colette put on her hood and asked if he would come with her. He bit his lip, and then put his hand on his chest and said that he would stop Ares. Prevent the birth of the demon lord. She said, "I understand." As expected of Kai. Colette told him to try his best to protect everyone. He agreed with her, and then he turned and waved at him, and said that she would wait for him. He should not be late and pick her up quickly. He should promise her. Kai smiled and said that he would solve everything and come for her right away. He promises. Colette is wrong. It is an ugly act for the benefit of everyone, it is all for him. He will save Griselda from the clutches of Ares and build friendly relations with the evil spirits. Cooperation with demons is necessary to face the consequences of the future. He realized the truth in the battle against the demon lord. Griselda said that she finally met the enemy Sasha, the warrior. He is the one she will never forgive. Ares thoughtfully scratched the back of his head and asked, "Huh? He is from the past." Yes, something like that happened. No one could have imagined that the harbinger of peace, the warrior, would be the cause of the destruction of humanity. If he saved Griselda's friend, Sasha, perhaps he would have stopped the birth of the demon lord. After a while, Kai concentrated energy in his hand, and then opened his eyes and said that now is the time to start a rebellion against this fate. At this time, in the dungeon, Ares straightened the whip and asked, "Has she changed her mind yet?" He asked for the last time. Griselda spat out blood and clenched her teeth. Ares said, "Griselda, she must kill Kai." She asked indignantly, "Huh? He wants her to kill his twin? How disgusting. She doesn't take orders from dirty idiots like him." He slammed the whip in front of her leg and said, "It seems she doesn't know what happens when someone disobeys orders." A bead of sweat ran down Griselda's face and she squeezed her eyes shut. There were magical symbols on her shackles, she thought, handcuffs to contain magical power. She put her hand to the shackle on her arm and said if it weren't for this, she would. Ares asked what she was going to do. He leaned towards her and told her to know her place. She was his slave. He gritted his teeth and told her to go and kill Kai, right now. There is a prophecy that a warrior will be born today. It will probably be this idiot. He is sure that Kai and Colette will get married after this. And that is the worst part. A vein popped on his face, and he shouted that he will not let this happen. Colette and the title of warrior should be his alone. Warrior, endless combat power, just an attribute of this class, designated by God as the strongest. Being special is the privilege of a warrior. Entering a house without asking. Stealing. Damaging property. All of these are the privileges of a warrior, approved by the law. He laughed madly and shouted, "Isn't this better? No one can go against the only being capable of defeating a demon lord. If he becomes a warrior, he can have any woman he wants." A drop of drool dripped from the corner of his mouth, and he said that he wants to be a warrior. Damn. If only this weren't all for him. If she kills Kai, he will definitely obtain the status of a warrior. Today is his last chance. Griselda trembled, but she said that this is not a noble reason at all. Just because he wants women? Bastard. He got angry and hit her, shouting that she is a bitch. She should just go and kill him already. What does she think he bought her for? The vampire clenched her teeth and shouted, "Stop underestimating her. Who does he think she is? She is an honorary vampire. The blood of a demon lord flows through her veins. Even if he kills her, she will not follow his orders. Ares said that she is just useless trash. He spent all his money on her." After that, he took out his sword and said, "Then let it be as she wants." He shouted that he will kill her. She should regret her choice. Griselda closed her eyes and clenched her teeth. Sasha shouted, "Stop. Please, he has to stop," she is begging him. He looked at her and Griselda excitedly shouted, "Sasha. Is she awake? She must be quiet." Sasha said, "No, she will not. Even if it is Ms. Griselda's order. Mr. Ares. She will go and kill him, so please, he must release Griselda." Ares put his foot on her face and asked, "Is she saying that she will go and kill him? She a low-class demon? Kai is the precious child of the Austin family." He kicked her in the face, and she screamed in pain. Griselda screamed, "Sasha. He is ugly." Ares smirked and grabbed Sasha's face and asked, "Is a maid so important to her?" She looked at him in fear, and he said that he found her funny. There are always demons like her, demons who act like humans. His father did a lot of things like that too. He put his sword to Sasha's neck and made a small cut. Griselda's face was covered in sweat. He said that he would give her one chance. She must say it. She will obey Master Ares' orders. He spread his arms out to the sides and said with a smile, "Her insignificant essence is Master Ares' loyal slave. She should just repeat after him. Even a stupid demon like her can do that, right?" Griselda looked up at him and said, "Such a humiliation." Ares put the sword to Sasha again and said that her precious servant will soon die. Griselda clenched her teeth in anger, and the warrior swung his sword. She shouted, "Okay, that's enough." Her body trembled, and Sasha shouted, "No, Lady Griselda. She must not worry about her." She said, "Sasha, she needs her." Then she closed her eyes and said that she will obey Lord Ares. Sasha shouted, "Lady Griselda. She cannot betray her honor like that." Griselda looked at her in confusion and said, "Sasha?" Ares indignantly asked, "Huh? They are bitches, stop ignoring him." He walked up to them and said, "Okay, he understands, die." He swung his sword, but the door of the grate opened. He looked at it and asked in surprise, "Huh?" Then his eyes widened in fear. Powerful energy was directed towards him from the magic seal that Kai created. The girls looked at it in surprise. Everything around was covered in smoke. Kai approached Griselda. Kai shouted, "No need, Ares." The warrior turned around and indignantly asked, "What?" Kai concentrated the energy in his fist and swung it approached the warrior. His face was covered in sweat and he asked in surprise, "Kai?" There was a magic seal on the dark mage's fist. He hit Ares and he flew into the wall. From the blow the stone wall was covered with cracks. The warrior screamed in pain, blood flowed from his mouth. The girls looked at it in confusion. Kai approached them and said, "Thank God. I made it." Ares sank to the floor unconscious. Griselda asked in confusion, "Who is he?" He asked, "Is she Griselda? And she wants to become the demon king?" She asked the king. "She?" He looked at the chained demon next to her and asked, "Is that Sasha then?" The demon said, "Lady Griselda." The protagonist said, "Ah, that Ares. What a bastard he is." Griselda looked at him seriously and asked, "How did he know their names?" Kai told her to wait first. He raised his hand and used recovering magic, Dark Hill, on Sasha. The girl was covered in his energy and her wounds disappeared. She said, "This is dark magic." Griselda screamed in surprise. The wounds were instantly healed. Kai stretched out his hand to her and said that he would heal her too. He thought that Griselda was his former enemy. But now in front of him is not a king who killed many people. Now she is a little girl who was made a slave. He also used Dark Hill on her. Her body was covered in his energy, and after that he used Break Shackles and the shackles on the girl's hands and feet were destroyed. Griselda looked at her hands in admiration and said, "They're gone. And her wounds too. And that vile magic of slavery too." She put her hand to her cheek and said, "And in just an instant," she said, "Sasha." Tears appeared in her eyes. She hugged the demon. Sasha said, "Mrs. Griselda." She hugged her back. They shouted, "Hooray! Finally! They're free!" Kai looked at them. Sasha burst into tears and said that she thought they were finished when their territory was taken away by Elsa, the demon's slayer. The protagonist asked, "Elsa? Is that really the red-haired magical swordswoman?" Griselda turned to him and asked, "Does he know her?" He said, "Yeah, he knows. The girls looked at him furiously and Sasha shouted indignantly, "Is he really in cahoots with her?" The black mage clenched his teeth and shouted that it wasn't so. Elsa destroyed many demon lands, gathering thousands of adventurers. Elsa said that God is money. Her goal is money. She sold kidnapped demons and accumulated wealth for herself. She was opposite the demons, for this she was supported by humans, and also due to her fame and youth, she was taken into the adventurer team. He does not want to have anything to do with her. Griselda looked at him seriously and said that she has not yet thanked him, human. She needs to thank him deeply. What is his name? He said that he is Kai. Kai Austin. She said, Kai, I see. So he is his older brother. Did he want to become a hero? Why did he decide to save them, demons? Kai asked, can they help him? Griselda asked in surprise, help? He showed his hand and said that he is nobody to human society. She looked at his hand in surprise and pointed her finger at it, and shouted, this is a dark mark. He is a dark mage? Sasha said, I see. So he uses dark magic, but that's weird. How can he use 2 higher magics at such a young age? Griselda said, I really can't believe it. Even though he saved them. Kai thoughtfully put his hands to his chin and asked, but what is Ares' goal? Sasha looked at the vampire and said, Lady Griselda. She said that she doesn't mind. She believes him. Sasha said that Ares told Kai, he wants to kill him and get the title of hero. The dark mage shouted in confusion, oh come on. He thought that he wanted to kill him from that moment. Griselda raised her index finger, and said admiringly that of course she refused him. Such a great king wouldn't help some scoundrel. Sasha smiled admiringly, and Griselda, turning to Kai, said that if it weren't for him, she would have lost an important friend. Kai remembered how she turned into a demon lord and thought, I see, so Griselda despaired and killed many people out of resentment. And all because of him. He walked up to his brother and stretched out his hand in front of him, concentrating energy. He thought, should I kill him right now? He remembered Ares' words, who belittled him. He thought that he was his. Then he remembered the happy Colette and thought, Colette. That's right. If he is killed, she will be very bitter. Griselda walked up to him and said, Kai. What is he going to do? He closed his eyes, and then thoughtfully put his fingers to his chin. After that he hit himself on the forehead. A cloud of magical energy appeared under his hand. Griselda looked at it in confusion. The cloud of energy began to turn into a lizard, and then crawled into Ares' mouth. Sasha leaned over, examining it closer, and said that it crawled into her mouth. Griselda asked, is this a curse? The protagonist said that she was good, she guessed. Ares' face had marks. Griselda turned to Kai and asked, what kind of curse is this? He looked at his brother, and said that it would make his life hell. Sasha asked, life hell? Kai said that she would understand later. Griselda sat down next to Ares and holding out her hand to him, admiringly said, however, good magic. Sasha indignantly said, there is not even a demon that can use dark magic so masterfully. More and more mysterious. The protagonist awkwardly said, well, and then he looked at the girls, their clothes were torn. He asked awkwardly, maybe he should dress them? They became embarrassed and said, ah. He stretched out his hand and used dark magic, dark closet. Kai stuck his hand into the open portal and said that he should have clothes to cover up here. Here they are. He said, probably change clothes in another place. After that, the girls were standing near the mirror. Griselda raised her hands and said Sasha, so she should change her clothes. Sasha put her hand to the side and said, Mr. Kai. She asked him to go to another room. He smiled awkwardly and thought that he would not peek. He thought that it was almost noon. Ares would soon be given the hero class. All damage except the curse will be restored by his resurrection skill. Only the holy sword remained. Griselda looked into the room and said, Kai. She shyly lifted the hem of her dress, showing off her outfit. She smiled and said that it was the first time she wore something like that. He smiled shyly and said that it suits her, Griselda. Her face turned red from embarrassment, and she thanked him. Sasha came up to them and said, how dare he dress Mrs. Griselda in a maid outfit? The vampire turned to her and said, oh Sasha, it suits her. Sasha happily thanked her. Kai interrupted them and asked if he could have some time. They looked at him, and he said that he needed to explain something to them. After a while, they sat opposite each other, and he told them everything. Griselda screamed in surprise, stop, he came from the future? She is the demon king? Is he serious? Kai said that that is not all. In the future, Ares killed him. And his team of adventurers betrayed him too. He clenched his teeth and lowered his head and said that's why he doesn't trust either people or heroes. Sasha remembered his recovery magic and said it's true. If it's true that he's from the future, you can understand why he's so good with magic. And she also thinks it's true that Lady Griselda became the Demon King. She smiled and said, well, yeah. If he wanted to deceive them, he would have come up with a more interesting lie by now. Especially since she now owes him her life. Kai smiled awkwardly, and she asked, so what should they do now? He confidently said that they would destroy Elsa. Griselda opened her eyes in surprise and asked, really? She made their people slaves and stole all the fossils. Now their people are still in agony. Then she lowered her head sadly. The protagonist put his hand to his chest and said that he would return everything. She looked at him admiringly and asked, will he save their people? He nodded in agreement, and she said, thank God. She burst into tears and said that she would now be able to look into the face of her father who had left them. Sasha also had tears in her eyes and she said, yes, Lady Griselda. Kai clenched his fists on his knees and said, and in exchange, could they let him and Colette live here? They were engaged. Griselda clarified, engaged? I see, so that's why he wanted her to help him. If so, then she had nothing against it. He said that she was to be given the title of Holy Maiden today. She screamed, stop. Holy Maiden? If they brought a Holy Maiden here, she might be persecuted by people from the Holy Kingdom. He folded his arms and confidently told them to rely on him. If the Holy Kingdom decided to attack, he would. Suddenly, a vase fell from the table. He turned around at the noise and, grabbing the girls, flew out of the building through a large crack in the wall that had formed. He looked at them and then lowered them to the ground. Griselda asked in surprise, what, they moved so quickly? The building caught fire, Kai said, it looks like the time has come. They must save themselves. Sasha took Griselda by the shoulders, and she clenched her teeth in anger and said, why so soon? Ares came out of the fire with a smile. And then he laughed loudly and asked, how is he doing, brother? What a face he made. Then he noticed a mark on his brother's hand and, widening his eyes in surprise, said, is this the mark of a dark mage? What a pity! And he hopes to become a hero with such useless magic? He looked at the mark on his hand and clenched his fist. He said that after all, he will be one. Kai looked at his hand and thought, this is a mark, his resurrection skill is already working. He said, after all, he became a hero, Ares. The warrior smiled madly and shouted that he won. He beat him. Now he will be the main one. Griselda said, and this freak hero? It can't be worse. Ares put his hand to his face and grinned, and said that he had smashed him pretty good. He offered to thank him. He stretched his hand forward and said that he didn't think that he would ever get this. The warrior raised his hand up and shouted, come! The holy sword Durandal. His body was covered with energy. Bright lightning flew into the sky. Then a sword appeared in his hand and he, looking at the weapon in his hand, said, this is the sword of a hero. Here is the proof that he is now the main one. Griselda asked in confusion, is this the same sword? Sasha said that the amount of magical energy in it is frightening. The vampire said that even Kai is unlikely. The main hero clenched his teeth and thought, Durandal, the sword that killed him the first time. Ares put his hand to his side and smiled and said that he can ask for mercy, brother. Kai said, Ares, so he pointed the sword at him. The warrior grinned and asked, does he not understand their difference in strength? Dark magician. He shouted, because he is a hero. No one can win against the sword with the most powerful magical energy. He must repent that he went against justice. Kai put his hand forward and said, stop wagging his tongue. He must attack. He will show him hell. A vein swelled on the warrior's face. He asked indignantly, him? Show? The dark magician beckoned him with his hand and said that he would break his sword in half. If his dark magic lost, he would not go outside. Ares shouted, interesting. It looks like he wants to die. He concentrated the energy in his sword and rushed forward, shouted that he would show him. The dark magician dodged the sword and thought, indeed, strong magical energy. He continued to dodge and thought that such habits would not take him. Then Ares stopped and shouted in confusion, how is he dodging? Kai thought, even though he is a hero, his strength is lower than the first level. Suddenly, a board appeared in front of the dark magician's face, on which it was written, a limited hidden class has been received for the second life. He thought in surprise, what? He was told, a hidden class, a dark star. He thought in surprise, what is this? He heard about it for the first time. Ares swung his sword over his head and approaching his brother shouted, die. Kai was told that this is a special class that can only be received by those who have ideally mastered dark magic in their first life. With the help of a dark star, you can remember all sorts of dark skills. If you do evil, evil points will accumulate, you can exchange them for skills. The dark magician thought, so you have to do evil to get skills. How can he do this? He should have been told that he was being congratulated. He looked at it in surprise, and the board said, "Great deed." He got 1,000 points. He thought, He didn't do anything. The board said he saved the demon and was confronting the hero. He smiled and thought, I see. Indeed, this is an evil deed. Then the rest will be easy. He was shown a list of possible skills to obtain. Kai noticed the demon sword summoning and said, "Here you go." He got the demon sword summoning skill for 1,000 points. Ares once again swung his sword and shouted, "Take it." Why is he looking back? Kai appeared behind him and said that he was too late. Now he can't be hit. The warrior turned around and indignantly asked, "What?" The protagonist stretched out his hand and said, "Come." The demon sword Dilfing. The ground cracked under their feet and Ares shouted in surprise, "What?" The ground cracked. A sword rose up from the ground and appeared in the hand of the dark mage. Kai thought that it was him, the sword of the demon king Griselda. The sword of the demon Dilfing, it strengthens proportionally to the dark magical energy. For him, with the level of a dark mage of 999, this weapon is simply perfect. The warriors looked at him in confusion and shouted, "What? What kind of sword is this?" The dark mage looked down at him. Kai got into a fighting stance with the sword of the demon Dilfing in his hands. He thought that he was absorbing magical energy with the sword. The sword was charged with dark magic. The protagonist stretched out his hand in front of him, examining the sword, and thought, "What kind of thing is this?" The girls looked at the sword. Griselda screamed, "This is her father's demon's sword." Sasha stood with her mouth open. Ares heard this and asked in surprise, "Is this really a demon's sword?" Kai held the demon's sword over his opponent's head. Ares' hair fell from his head. He realized something and asked, "Where is he aiming?" The buildings behind his wall collapsed, and everything around him was burning. Kai touched not only his hair, but also cut the buildings behind him. Ares saw what was happening behind his back and was very surprised. A strong fire started. Kai looked at the sword in his hands with pleasure, and said that it seemed that he could not control his power. His opponent turned around and in a panic from what he saw, began to ask and shout about what this is. Is this even possible? Is this the power of the demon's sword? Kai frowned and thought that this was not quite true. His magical energy is simply concentrated in the power of destruction. Ares suddenly realized something and shouted at him with a satisfied face to wait. He raised his head, covering his forehead with his hand, and began to laugh hysterically. Age shouted that he scared him. He does not know the law of the cycle of elements. The holy sword is of the element of light, and the sword of demons is of darkness. When the holy sword hits the darkness, its power increases many times over. The sword in Ares' hands was overflowing with energy. He shouted for Kai to watch how his sword of light Delandum was sparkling. Kai looked at it carefully, and thought that this was the strongest sword of light. He was jealous. What was he going to do with it now? His opponent smiled and said that he would show him the power of the holy ball. Ares began to shine completely with holy energy. Kai confidently told him to attack. His opponent was filled with rage. He ran at Kai with an attack and shouted for him to die. Ares used the magic final blow. A strong stream of energy flew at the main character. Ares shouted that this is exactly the power of a hero. This stream of energy flew at Kai and was shining. The magical cloud of energy was flying at him rapidly. Sasha covered herself with her hand from the light. She tried to stay on her feet and covered her mistress. Griselda at that moment leaned forward in surprise and shouted, "What a big cloud of magical energy it was! It was impossible to dodge it. If it hits Kai, then even he." The cloud of magical energy hung near Kai, which surprised him. It exploded and left behind a large hole. Ares stood and looked at the empty hole. Sasha was very surprised, she could not believe it, as well as her mistress. Ares exhaled triumphantly and smiled. He laughed hysterically and shouted that not even a speck of dust was left of him. Ares rejoiced and shouted that his time had come. Now everything, the money, the land, the glory is his. He looked at the girls, licking his lips, and said that the women and Colette are now his too. Griselda collapsed to the ground from the realization. She could not believe that Kai lost. Ares looked at the girls with a devouring gaze and said that he cannot let someone like him escape. Sasha hugged and covered her mistress on the floor. He told them that they were next. Suddenly, Kai runs up to Ares' back. He thought that this was the moment he was waiting for. Ares looked at him and did not understand anything. The protagonist asked, did he really think he had won? A second before the explosion, he used the darkness magic, instant movement. Ares stepped back a few steps and was unable to believe him. Kai thought that the demon's sword did not cause any damage to the holy sword, but when Ares used the final blow, it temporarily neutralized its magical energy. In his first life, the protagonist had seen this weak spot of the holy sword many times. Ares looked at the sword reproachfully, and realized that the magical energy in the sword was gone. Kai thought that now was the time. He started attacking his opponent, and shouted for the hero's sword to disappear from this world. Kai thought that he could break it now and hit it with his charged sword. The holy sword cracked and then it shattered into 2 pieces. Ares looked at his sword with disappointment, and shouted that this was his holy sword. Something suddenly threw him up and knocked him down with a clatter to the ground. Kai tried to catch his breath and said that it was clear to him. The sword fully lived up to its name. It takes a lot of his magical energy, and he only uses it for 15 minutes. The main character concentrated and thought that if he used this sword at level 1, he would die in an instant. What a problematic skill this Dark Star is. Something dinged. A system window popped up with congratulations, he broke the holy sword and the hero won. He gets 3,000 points. Griselda screamed his name with joy and asked if he was alive. He won. He defeated Ares. Sasha folded her hands with pride and rejoiced. Kai rejoiced in his victory. After a while, they stood over Ares. The protagonist said that he was still breathing. Griselda thought about it and asked how soon he would wake up. He answered that he would not soon and explained that resurrection was only possible once a day. Something in Ares' head cracked. Griselda saw and screamed that this curse had begun to act. The curse from Ares' head descended to the class mark on his hand. Kai said that when he wanted to harm someone, his mark of light would change to a dark mark. That's how he cursed him. The curse covered the Ares mark and changed it to another. Kai said that the mark of light, that is, the hero mark, is considered honorable, and the dark mark is its complete opposite. Ares has now become a fake hero, and the Austen family will lose their glory. This is his revenge on Ares and his father, who took his life. The curse he cast on him. The holy sword he broke for him, now it can be considered that Ares died as a hero. The protagonist heard something behind him and asked, were they the ones making the noise? Griselda flew up to him, which he didn't expect, and tried to get his attention, calling him Lord. Kai asked in confusion and fear, why Lord? She enthusiastically shouted that he broke the holy sword and defeated the hero. He became the savior of demons. Griselda proudly declared that now he will undoubtedly be the new demon king. Kai broke out in a cold sweat. He asked her out of fear, that he will become the demon king? Somewhere in the forest by the river, a horse was quenching its thirst. Colette said that she was wondering how Kai was doing. The archdemon in his small form asked her not to worry and said that Kai was probably able to resist the appearance of the demon king. The girl sat on a rock and said that she hoped that he was unharmed. In the current world, there is no one who can compare to Mr. Kai. She stroked the small archdemon that she was holding in her arms. Colette said with admiration that she was surprised that he could become so small. The archdemon asked her to calm down. He got out of her arms and began to fly above her. The archdemon said that this form was nothing more than a temporary form for movement. He would protect her. She clapped in admiration and said that he was flapping his wings so cutely. Suddenly, the archdemon noticed something in the distance and said that the holy knights of the holy capital were coming and they needed to hide. Colette did not understand why they would do that. He told her that they were probably looking for her with all their might, especially when they found out that the strongest, holy maiden, was missing. The girl got nervous and simply agreed with him. She was worried and asked Kai to come quickly. At the same time, Griselda was yelling at the protagonist that he was the demon king. Kai asked in fear, why him? The demon king? The girl agreed with him. He pushed her away from him and asked her to calm down. Kai explained to her that the ability to use the demon's sword does not make him a king. Griselda said that he was saying something wrong. She crossed her legs in admiration and exclaimed that only those with the demon king class can receive the demon sword summoning. Here is the proof. Sasha agreed with her, and said that he broke the holy sword and defeated the hero. No previous demon king was able to achieve this. He is the one who is worthy of being called the strongest demon king. The girls looked at him, waiting for a reaction. Kai thought he was in trouble. It seemed they really believed that he was the demon king. However, if the demons accepted him, it would be good for him. Kai looked at them seriously and thoughtfully said that he was the demon king. Griselda said with a smile that in order to become the demon king, he only needed to do one thing: enter into a servant contract. The protagonist was surprised by this information. She seriously asked, did he really not know about it at all? The girl began to explain to him that the servant contract is a special skill of the demon king. The one who entered into the contract receives a class from the demon king and becomes many times stronger. And in return, he swears absolute submission. Kai asked, servants? He said that there was no such skill in his abilities. The protagonist opened the information window and began to search. Suddenly, he saw that a new skill had opened up for him to obtain. Kai thought that this was it. It was written there, Servant Contract, 300. Conditions for unlocking the skill: destroy the hero's holy sword. He thought that after that battle, he had become eligible for these conditions. Now he could see the classes he could give with the contract. Demon Captain increases the subject's attacks by 12 times and gives him one skill from the Demon King. Condition: you can create only 16 magic captains. When you recruit a demon warrior, all the subordinate statuses increase by 1.5 times. The subject is given 2 skills from the Demon King. Condition: you can create only 8 demon warriors. With the skill for Heavenly Kings, all the subject's statuses increase by 2 times. The subject is given 3 skills from the Demon King. Condition: you can create only 4 Heavenly Kings. Kai understood everything. He thought that this was why the Demon King's warrior was so strong. The protagonist saw a note that said that the contract is concluded only with the consent of both parties. It is possible to change the class or remove it completely. Those who decide to oppose the master will be killed. Kai was surprised and screamed, will they be killed? He realized and asked, is this a real contract? Griselda confirmed and said that her father's will said that one must swear allegiance to the new Demon King. She proudly said that she trusted Kai and she had nothing to lose. The protagonist sighed and agreed with her. He clenched his fist and said that since they agreed, Griselda confirmed his words and said that they wished for it. Sasha said that it was an honor for them. The girls knelt down on one knee as a sign of respect and submission. Something clinked. Kai received a notification about receiving the skill, Servant Contract. He extended his hand with a mark and said that he was giving Sasha the skill, Demon Warrior. She was amazed at his choice and asked him again that he was giving her the skill of a warrior. Griselda put her hand on her shoulder and said that demon warriors are chosen not only by strength. Loyalty is the main thing in this matter. Sasha, with hope in her eyes, called her mistress. Kai looked at the girl and asked, well? Sasha closed her eyes. She named his masters and confidently said that let him make her a demon warrior. She swears absolute loyalty to him. He agreed. Kai put his hand with magic runes in front of her and said that he was giving her the class of demon warrior. A mark appeared on her hand. Sasha, feeling a surge of strength, said that strength was flowing in her. She shone and was filled with energy. Griselda was surprised and shouted that this was the servant's contract. Kai was surprised and thought, what does this mean, demon warrior? Griselda called him master and confidently said that she asked to give her the power to protect the demon race. Let him give her the class of Heavenly King. She swore allegiance to him. Kai thought that this was the same Griselda who could become the Demon King herself. Much could be expected from her. He looked at his hand and thought that he never thought that the day would come when he would make a servant contract with the Demon King. The protagonist agreed and put his hand with magic runes in front of her head. He said that he was giving her the class of Heavenly King. Suddenly, a pillar of dark energy appeared above the houses. Kai and Sasha looked at Griselda in surprise. He was scared. Griselda emitted a very powerful dark aura. Sasha called her mistress by name to make sure she could hear her. Griselda raised her fist to him and screamed with joy that now she had part of the master's power in her. She became the Heavenly King who will make her master Kai proud. The protagonist looked at her with admiration and said that this was really the Demon King Griselda. Sasha congratulated her mistress on receiving a class. Griselda stood pleased and proud. She said that they became subjects of Mr. Kai, who defeated the hero. Sasha thought about it and said that now she would be needed too. Griselda screamed that now she understood. She had also become stronger. They would create a new world of demons together with their master. The girls hugged each other with happiness. Sasha agreed with Griselda. Kai looked at them and thought that he had defeated Ares and received the Demon King as a partner. Fate had already changed. But until now, some strange sound interrupted his thoughts. He turned around and saw his father's army. His father was furious. He began to take out his sword and screamed, how would his stupid son explain this? Divine Knight, Heavenly Knight Gies. Commander Gies asked in anger, how could Ares lose? He stood in a fighting stance and kept asking, why is he with the demons? Let him answer him. Kai hid the girls behind his back. Griselda asked irritably that he had a confident stance. Who is he? The protagonist confidently answered that he was the leader of the Holy Knights, his father. Somewhere near the destroyed buildings, the army found Ares' body. They examined his body and realized that he was still breathing. Gies stood in the same pose and turned to his son. He said that his son did not even show up for the class promotion ceremony. What was he even doing? Kai told him that he was a dark mage. His father was very shocked. He asked furiously, wasn't he supposed to be a hero? Kai laughed and showed his hand with the mark. He said that now his son will become the Demon King. Gies broke out in a cold sweat. He shouted, pointing his finger at him, that this was a dark mark. So he really was a dark mage? Gies called him a fool and shouted that he really decided to become the Demon King. He lost the pride of the Austen family a sense of justice? Kai clenched his fist and asked again, justice? He confidently said that he had seen enough of his justice in childhood. How he threatened and tortured people. The protagonist thought that he hid the birth of the Demon King from everyone, and then banished his son, after which he ordered to kill him. He said that for a heavenly knight, only his ego is important. If this is justice for his father, he does not mind becoming evil. Gies menacingly pointed his sword at him, and told him not to think that his son will live like before with such a class. Kai asked him not to worry and said that now Gies is also not part of the Austen family. He snapped his fingers and said that he is banishing him. A flame burst out behind Gies and his army. He turned around and panicked. Not just one building was burning, but all the buildings in the area. Gies screamed, what is this? His army screamed that things are bad. The flames are spreading from house to house. The townspeople began to panic and scream that there is a fire here too. And the barn is on fire too. They need to run quickly. Gies turned to his son and asked in rage what he did. Griselda asked her master when he had time to prepare for this. Kai said that while he was looking for her, he tried to make sure that no one died. Something clinked. Kai received a notification with congratulations. He set fire to his parents' house. This is an excellent crime. He gets 500 points. The protagonist smiled and thought that he was very lucky. This system is very suitable for revenge. He should definitely take some skill. For example, the skill Darkness Enhancement. With each level, the power of darkness increases by 1%. Gies screamed in rage at his son, how dare he? Kai told him that the Austen family should disappear, such was his justice. Gies screamed at the top of his voice for the army to kill his son. That he was no longer his son. The army surrounded the protagonist. They tried to reach him with their spears. Kai simply walked away, and the dark energy from his back killed all the soldiers who tried to attack him. He told them to get some sleep. Gies ran at his son with a sword. He screamed at him not to think that he could get away with it. They were just pawns to him. Kai said that he knew it. He concentrated the dark energy in his hand and screamed for Tilfing to come. The very sword with which he crushed the hero appeared in his hands. The protagonist stood in a real sword fight with his father. They both made faces from trying to hold their position. Gies screamed that the sword was in his son's hands. But suddenly his hand flew up. He didn't understand anything. Kai swung his sword and with a confident movement cut off his father's hand. Gies screamed in pain, and his hand with the sword fell to the ground. The soldier ran up to the commander and handed him the sword from the ground. Gies grunted in pain. He screamed at his son that this was really a demon's sword. Did he decide to stop being a human? Gies sat in a confident pose and said that he couldn't be taken by this. He used the special magic of the Heavenly Knight's Restoration. Knight's Restoration. Gies said that he had one hand in an instant. But suddenly he realized that for some reason his hand was not restoring. Kai said that he finally noticed that he had eternal blood magic on him, which blocked any restoration magic. The protagonist thought that he had cast it before he cut off his father's hand with the help of the highest curse magic at level 850. He specified that even the Holy Virgin would not restore him. He stopped his bleeding, let him accept this as his last duty to his father. Gi's held his wound with his hand and shouted that he had just received a class. How is he? Kai said that a warrior who had lost his dominant hand was the same as a corpse. Now his father's justice had no strength. His father shouted his name. The protagonist remembered moments from his first life, where his father had done something terrible. He closed his eyes and said that his father had killed him. Gi's did not understand him and asked what he was saying. Something clinked. The protagonist received a notification with congratulations. He had made his own father an invalid. He was getting 500 points. Gi's noticed something and laughed maliciously. He said that everything was clear to him. That if not Kai, then Ares. He shouted, which meant Ares had become a hero. Saint Jonah's predictions were always true. The protagonist was silent and waited. Gi shouted with a satisfied face for the soldiers to cast restoration magic on him and defeat the evil dark mage along with the hero. The soldier pointed at Ares with trembling hands and said that something was wrong with him. Gi's looked at his son and did not understand. Suddenly he saw and shouted that Ares also had a dark mark? Did he also receive the dark mage class? This can't be. Ion's predictions cannot fail to come true. Kai thought that right, the predictions of the saint, Ion, were correct. Ares really became a hero. He just covered his mark of light with the mark of darkness. Ion was the main danger to his plan. That's for sure, since he was from the hero's team. His unique skill, prediction, accurately predicted the next 7 days. He needed to get rid of him as soon as possible. Gi's was depressed by the news. Kai asked if his father wanted to banish Ares now? Since he now had both heirs of the dark class, then the family's pride was over. His father screamed in rage, a nightmare. What will happen to the valor of the Austen family now? The soldier turned to him and asked what they would do with Mr. Ares. Would they treat him? He screamed, no, they would throw him in the trash. He was a dirty stain. His family didn't need anyone of the dark class. They had to be exiled. Kai exhaled and thought that his father was a fool, and yet a hero lay before him. Now Ares would lose his status as an aristocrat as well. The protagonist's goal had been accomplished. There was nothing more for him to do here. He informed his father that he was leaving. Guys was still kneeling and turned to his son. He asked that he was seriously going to side with the demons? And his son was going to side with them too? Kai agreed with his words and said that at least he could trust them. The protagonist thought that he could only trust Colette. He approached the girls and suggested that they go from there. They agreed. Griselda praised him. Sasha said that he was great. Kai thought that looking at them, it seemed to him that the demons had pure hearts. For him, who understands the vileness of people, their hearts are too innocent. The protagonist said goodbye to his father. They left the gate and a guard approached them. He asked the protagonist if something had happened inside. Kai told the guard to tell everyone that they shouldn't see him off and that he would kill anyone who followed him. The guard agreed with his every word and was very scared in the end. Kai thanked him and left. At one point, all three disappeared. The guard was very surprised. Kai used the dark magic, instant movement. The guard said in shock that the master had just disappeared. The protagonist and his subordinates appeared in the forest near the river. The girls were very surprised. Kai turned to them and said with a smile that they needed to go. Sasha looked around and said that this was such convenient magic, they were already so far away. Griselda said admiringly that he showed his father where his place was and praised him. The protagonist thanked them. Griselda asked if they could go further into the demon territory. Kai agreed and said that they should hurry, but first they needed to get to Lax village to Colette. Suddenly, the protagonist realized something and said that he would strengthen the girls a little, just in case. Griselda was surprised and asked loudly, would they become even stronger? He put his hand on the girls and said that he was giving Griselda and Sasha a 10th level dark magic boost. The girls groaned from the surge of strength. Griselda screamed that something warm passed through her. Sasha screamed that it was too much for her. Kai thought that one of the abilities of the subject contract, the ability to give a subject any of his skills. He himself would not lose it, so he was more likely sharing it than giving it. The protagonist scratched his head and apologized to them. The girls tried to catch their breath. They stuttered and caught their breath trying to thank him for his strength. He didn't expect such a reaction and asked what could be better for them to rest. They all sat down on a stump and rested. Kai remembered about the bracelet and started looking for it. He thought that Colette should be safe. She gave him the bracelet as a talisman during his first life. The bracelet broke, but strong magical energy still emanated from it. So thanks to him. Suddenly the main character realized that he could use that very skill. He started looking for it in his skills and found it. The skill, item appraisal. The cost of the skill is 500 points. With its help, you can find out the price, ownership, and how to use the selected item. Kai began analyzing the item. The assessment was made and found out that it was a time bracelet. Inside this bracelet is a prayer for a second meeting with a lover. It contained the magical power of the Holy Maiden of Time. With the help of this bracelet, the owner's magical protection is increased by 5%. Kai's eyes widened and he thought so. So thanks to this bracelet, he was able to be reborn. The protagonist remembered fragments of his first life, clenched his fist with the bracelet, and thought that it was thanks to Colette that he destroyed the Austen family that separated them. He would be able to change the future. Now they would be happy together. Kai realized that she was the Holy Maiden of Time. Did she also have a hidden class? So she was not a Holy Maiden. He thought that he should not draw conclusions, but rather meet her as soon as possible. Griselda looked at the master with confusion and asked what happened. Kai answered that nothing. He led them on their way. The girls happily agreed with him and followed their master. The protagonist told Colette to wait for him. In a dark room, by the light of a lantern, someone was kneeling in front of Jonah. He praised him and let him go. The knight agreed with him and left. Jonah said, smiling maliciously, that he had finally found the Holy Maiden of Time. Some time later, in the village of Lax, Saint Jonah and his subordinates were interrogating people. He stood over a tied man with a book in the rivers. One of his subordinates pointed a sword at the man. Jonah bowed before him and interrogated him. As a result of the questions, several tied people were sitting on the street. Saint Jonah said that they had found out the approximate location of Saint Colette, and there was no point in interrogating them anymore. He thanked them for their help and asked his subordinates to erase their memories with magic and let them go. The subordinates accepted the order. The people did not understand anything and shouted, "Are they going to let them go? Are they going to erase their memories?" The man shouted, he asked not to cast such dangerous magic on them. He had heard that it could drive you crazy. Jonah adjusted his glasses and said that since the man was so selfish, he would do him a favor. He asked his subordinate to kill that man. The man was sweating from what he heard. Jonah asked the rest of the tied ones, "Are there any who are also against the magic of oblivion?" The crowd denied it in fear. Jonah laughed and said how wonderful it was that there was only one. In the forest near the village of Lax, frightened crows flew out. Colette quickly ran away from her pursuers. 2 of Saint Jonah's subordinates were chasing her. The girl was out of breath. Saint Jonah raised his hand and said that the Pope's prayers would definitely reach the saint. Let her be saved. He thought that it did not matter to him who he would be, a hero or a demon king. He only needed a second life. Only the Holy Maiden of Time could fulfill his wish. And his prediction skill would not let Colette, the daughter of the Marquis of Vam, escape. One of his subordinates turned to him and asked why he was letting her escape. Saint Jonah said that it was strange. She probably thought they were bandits because of the darkness. He thought that it was unlikely that she sensed anything with her skill. The girl ran to the building and tried to look around. She realized that she had run into a dead end. Her subordinates caught up with her. The archdemon shouted that if only he had noticed faster. Colette waited for a moment and said that nothing terrible had happened and that they could probably talk. Among the subordinates was Saint Jonah himself and addressed her by name. He expressed his joy at meeting her with a bow. He tried to get a good look at her. The girl addressed him by name dryly and sternly. Suddenly Saint Jonah noticed a mark on her hand and wondered if this could really be the Holy Virgin of Time. Colette said that she wondered what their purpose was, since they were making such a noise. Saint Jonah smiled and said that they had come for her. He learned that a new demon king had appeared thanks to a prophecy. They wanted her to set up a holy barrier around the capital. The girl refused with a displeased face and said that it was his duty. She pressed her fist to her chest and screamed that she had nothing to fear, that a real hero named Kai had prevented the birth of a demon king. Saint Jonah looked at her questioningly. Colette asked that didn't he predict that a demon king would be born today and kill half the country's population? But if it hadn't happened yet, that meant Kai had figured it out. He laughed and asked how she knew his prediction? She confidently said that Kai had told her about it, and he probably wouldn't believe her, but he came from the future. He saved a lot of people today. Kai is the real hero. Saint Jonah began laughing hysterically and said, "What's going on?" He screamed. "What do you mean there is someone who lives a second life? This Kai, isn't he the son of the Austen family by any chance?" Colette confirmed it. Saint Jonah said that unfortunately, he almost killed his brother with his dark powers. And he also went against his own family. He set his own house on fire and ran away. Colette screamed as he set it on fire. "That can't be true." He said she was lying. Saint Jonah screamed, his predictions were always right. He said Kai Austen was the evil demon king. But he didn't think the girl would be on his side. Colette screamed in fear. What was he doing? He pointed his finger at her and screamed for her to be tied up. Saint Jonah thought that Kai Austen living a second life was a terrible danger. He realized that he and Colette had a special relationship. If he took her hostage, he wouldn't raise a hand against them. And if everything went smoothly, they would be able to get information out of him. Colette asked them to wait. Saint Jonah continued to think that he would succeed. After all, the Holy Virgin of Time was the key to the second life. The day is near when he will rule the world. Suddenly, the archdemon appears from behind the girl. He transformed into his true form and roared at them. The subordinates were terrified. They all screamed in fear. The archdemon attacked them with his claws and cut their bodies. The subordinate addressed Saint Jonah stuttering. The archdemon stood behind the girl and held a flame in his hand. Colette said that she thought they would be able to talk, but it seemed like everything was as Kai had told her. Saint Jonah did not believe it and screamed that this could not be. "This is the archdemon?" she asked. "So Jonah is to blame for the corruption of the werewolf. Let him tell them about his sins." He screamed in fear and apologized. He said that everything will be as she says. The archdemon said that he will make his mouth no longer speak, since Jonah thinks to escape with such a lie. Colette asked him to stop. The archdemon turned to his mistress. She stood next to him and watched. Saint Jonah screamed that the emperor had forced him to do this. He didn't want to do this. If the demon king had never been born, there would be no point in him chasing the girl. She asked him if it was true. Saint Jonah confirmed his words. He bowed his face, smiled evilly, and swore to his words. Colette accepted his words. She asked them to drop all weapons and surrender to them. Saint Jonah accepted her order and said that he had one request. His squad had casualties due to the demon's attack. The girl began to worry and screamed that he needed to be healed quickly. Saint Jonah forbade her and said that it was his fault, that he would deal with it himself. Colette agreed. He took out a bottle of potion and began to feed it to the wounded man. Saint Jonah told him to drink this recovery potion. Let him take his time, it's so delicious and very sweet. He laughed in the girl's face and shouted, "She's so gullible." The subordinate started coughing. The girl didn't understand anything. The archdemon screamed, the boy coughed something. The subordinate started to transform, he screamed in pain and thought that he would explode right now. Colette began to panic. The subordinate became huge, like the archdemon. He grabbed the enemy's fist and tried out his new power. Saint Jonah shouted that he increased his level. "How is she level 800? The subordinate's eyes bulged and shouted that it was a miracle. He will be able to resist the archdemon. The archdemon screamed discontentedly, which meant he had an ace up his sleeve. But he is not that simple. They clashed in battle. Colette began to retreat in fear. Saint Jonah shouted that she was caught. He opened his book and said that then he would make sure that the girl did not escape. He used the light magic, Holy Arrow. The archdemon saw it. Saint Jonah rejoiced in his victory. The arrow reached the girl in an instant. Colette tried to dodge it. Saint Jonah called her name and controlled the arrow. Suddenly, the archdemon managed to block the girl with himself, and the arrow hit him right in the chest. The girl began to scream his name out of sadness and did not understand why he did this. The archdemon screamed in pain. The subordinates looked at this in horror. Saint Jonah said that Colette was very gullible. He did not think that a higher demon would stoop so low as to act like a loyal cur. The subordinate knights bowed before their swords and activated their magic. Jonah shouted for the holy knights to proceed. They accepted his order. The man said that this was for the sake of justice. They ran with their swords glowing with magical energy at the archdemon to finish him off. Jonah adjusted his glasses and thought that light was effective against darkness. His subordinates cut him into many pieces. Jonah kept thinking that this might be a bit too much for a darkness attribute archdemon. Colette screamed that it was very mean. After such an act, he calls himself a saint? What a shame! Jonah laughed and asked again, mean? He was put in this position of a saint, which means he is justice. The archdemon exhaled and said that Jonah was a mean little human. He fell unconscious, saying the girl's name and telling her that she needed to save herself. His body disappeared. Colette looked at it in horror. She couldn't believe it. The mutated subordinate stood and admired his victory over the archdemon. Suddenly, all of his veins bulged, and blood poured out of numerous cracks. He screamed in pain and landed on the ground. The subordinate looked at his master with hope and asked to restore him. Jonah told him not to come near him. He was disgusting. The subordinate was bleeding and did not understand anything. Colette ran up and started trying to heal him with her hands. The girl said that she would not abandon him. She would heal him right now. The subordinate looked at her and cried. He admired her kindness and said that it was so sweet of her. How could he do this to her? The girl healed him and cried. The subordinate began to apologize to her, but something inside him exploded and a large stream of blood came out of his mouth. The blood got right on Colette's face and hair. Jonah came up and said that it was so ugly. Things were bad, they needed to change. Colette realized and asked, did he probably know that this would happen? Jonah was standing with an open book. He confirmed her words and said that this was a potion to enhance magic in exchange for strength. The girl could not hold back her emotions and cried. She said that he called Kai the Demon King, and in the end he turned out to be an enemy of the people. Worse than a demon. Jonah closed the book, saying that he was very sorry. He sat down and hugged the girl. He thought she would like it. Colette was crying. Jonah stood up and told his men that they had an emergency. He shouted that the girl was being protected by a demon, a subordinate of the Demon King. He most likely brainwashed her. Colette screamed, "What?" Jonah turned around and looked at the girl with a smirk. He used the skill, Holy Chain, and tied the girl up so that she could not escape. She begged him to stop. Jonah shouted for her to listen to him. Kai is their enemy. He forbids her to contact him. Colette did not agree. Jonah shouted that if she went against him, the chains would squeeze her even tighter. The girl said that Kai cannot be an enemy. Jonah laughed and said that he knew it. She loves him, what wonderful feelings. Colette bent over and cried. Jonah said that he wondered how long her feelings would last and that they would all turn into pain for her. He laughed hysterically and looked at the book. The girl thought about her lover. The frightened subordinate turned to Saint Jonah and said that this was too much, because she was so merciful. Jonah looked at him sharply and shot him in the forehead with his arrow. The man fell to the ground. Jonah laughed and said that he was another heretic. Colette was amazed at what she saw and said that this was too much. God sees everything. He will punish him. Jonah laughed in her face and shouted that it was God who made him saint. He is justice. It is she who will be punished. The chains squeezed the girl tighter and tighter. She again remembered Kai and apologized to her love. Jonah laughed, admiring himself, and said that if they used it, the Demon King living a second life would not be a hindrance to them. The fun began. Let the holy maiden await him. Shortly before, Kai was walking from the forest with sticks in his hands. He wondered if his beloved had reached the village unharmed. He was thinking about her. The protagonist came to the house and said that he had returned. In the house, they were cooking a fragrant soup of vegetables and meat. The girls happily reported that they had prepared dinner for everyone. Griselda praised Sasha and said that the food looked very tasty. Kai smelled the aromas and said that the house smelled so delicious. From frequent use of instant movement, his stomach was already empty. He would be happy to taste it. Suddenly, he felt pain in his hand, on which he had a mark. He dropped the sticks on the floor and groaned in pain. The girls noticed this and began to worry about him. Kai looked at his hand and asked that the magical energy he gave to the archdemon had returned to him. The protagonist realized and thought that the archdemon had been defeated. He contacted him via telepathy. The archdemon answered him and said that he was listening to him. Kai asked what was wrong with Colette. The archdemon apologized to the master and said that the girl had been kidnapped. The protagonist was stunned by what he heard.